Our world is filled with a quiet, persistent hum of anxiety. It is a search for calm that feels increasingly out of reach. Yet the answer is not a new app or a complex theory. It is an ancient practice of mental strength, waiting in the words of a Roman emperor. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. This is the core of Stoicism. It is not a dusty philosophy, but a practical toolkit for building an unshakable mind. Today, we will explore 25 specific Stoic habits. These are not abstract ideas. They are daily actions designed to forge long-term calm and resilience from the inside out. You will gain a complete system to navigate stress, uncertainty, and pressure with a newfound sense of control. How many of us have wondered if true mental peace is even possible in a chaotic world? By the end, you will have a clear path. What does it truly mean to build a fortress within your own mind? The first habit is a mental rehearsal for the day ahead. The Stoics called this Premeditatio Malorum, which means the premeditation of evils. Now, that word might sound grim, but this practice is not about expecting the worst. It is about preparing for it, like a fire drill for your mind. Think of it as an emotional inoculation. By deliberately considering what could go wrong, you remove the element of surprise and the sting of shock that so often leads to panic or anger. The philosopher Seneca put it beautifully. He wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality, and that by rehearsing our troubles in advance, we can soften the blow when they arrive. Always within your control. The philosopher Epictetus urged his students to examine their impressions carefully. He taught that we are not disturbed by events, but by the judgments we make about them. The evening review is where you audit those judgments. It is a simple practice. Find a quiet moment before sleep. Look back on your day. Ask yourself not just what happened, but where did your mind go? Where did you act with wisdom, and where did fear or frustration take the wheel? A practical framework is to review your day through the lens of the 4 cardinal virtues the Stoics held dear. First, wisdom. Did I act with good judgment today, or did I react impulsively? Perhaps you navigated a difficult conversation with patience. That is wisdom. Second, courage. Did I stand up for what was right, or did I avoid a necessary challenge out of comfort? Maybe you finally voiced a thoughtful concern in a meeting. Third, justice. Did I treat others fairly and with respect, or did I act selfishly? This could be as simple as truly listening to a friend instead of waiting for your turn to talk. And fourth, temperance or self-control. Did I exercise moderation, or did I give in to excess in my emotions, my words, or my desires? Perhaps you felt anger rise and chose to step away instead of lashing out. The goal is not to tally failures, but to see clearly. It is to recognize that between an event and your reaction, there is a space. In that space is your power to choose a different response. So tonight, ask yourself this one reflective question. What is one judgment I made today, one automatic reaction, that if I could rewind the tape, I would choose to meet with a little more clarity, a little more patience? Just identifying it begins to widen that space for tomorrow. This is the foundational Stoic habit of sorting your concerns. It is a simple, powerful filter for your entire life, and its power lies entirely in the practice of using it. The core idea comes directly from the opening lines of the Enchiridion by the philosopher Epictetus. He wrote that some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us. Up to us are our judgments, our impulses, our desires, our aversions. In short, everything that is our own doing. Not up to us are our body, our property, our reputation, our public office. In short, everything that is not our own doing. This is the dichotomy of control. It is not a philosophy of detachment or indifference. It is a strategy of profound focus. Your emotional energy is a finite resource like the battery on your phone. Anxiety and frustration are what happen when you pour that precious energy into charging things you have no power to plug into. The practice is a constant mental sorting exercise. When a worry or a stressor enters your mind, you pause and ask one question: what part of this is truly, directly within my control? You will find that most worries are a tangled mix of both. Take a common source of modern anxiety, a job interview. You cannot control whether the other candidates are more qualified. You cannot control the interviewer's mood or personal biases. You cannot control the final decision. What can you control? You can control your preparation. You can research the company, practice your answers, and choose your attire. You can control your effort. You can be punctual, be attentive, and give your full focus to the conversation. You can control your attitude. You can choose to be curious, to be gracious, and to view the experience as a learning opportunity regardless of the outcome. By sorting the concern this way, you immediately redirect your energy. Instead of draining yourself by mentally rehearsing every possible thing that could go wrong, you channel that same energy into the few things you can actually influence. The result is not a guarantee of success, but a guarantee of personal agency. You walk into that room carrying a calm confidence, not because you know you will get the job, but because you know you have done everything within your power. The same filter applies to smaller daily stresses. You cannot control the traffic, but you can control when you leave the house and what you listen to in the car. You cannot control a loved one's health challenge, but you can control how present and supportive you are for them. The practice trains your mind to stop fighting the weather and instead to simply put on a coat or carry an umbrella. So here is a simple exercise. Take a current worry you are carrying, write it down at the top of a page, draw a line down the middle. On the left, list every element of that situation that is not within your direct control. On the right, list every single action, thought, or choice that is. Then, for the rest of the day, consciously direct your attention and effort only to the column on the right. Notice what happens to the weight of the worry when you stop trying to hold up the entire sky and instead focus on building a sturdy shelter. The fourth habit involves seeking out small discomforts on purpose. This sounds completely backwards, does it not? In a world dedicated to convenience and comfort, why would anyone choose to be even slightly uncomfortable? The Stoics saw this as essential training for the inevitable twists of fortune. It is a way to build calluses on your mind, to prove to yourself that you are far more resilient than your circumstances. The philosopher Musonius Rufus taught that just as physical exercise strengthens the body, hardship strengthens the mind. He argued for practicing with little, for eating simple food, wearing plain clothing, and sleeping on a hard bed. The goal is not to live in poverty or to punish yourself. The goal is to remove the fear of poverty, the fear of hardship. It is to discover that your well-being does not depend on perfect conditions. Seneca put it powerfully, writing that we should periodically send ourselves into want so that we may grow strong again. Think of it like a fire drill. You do not hope for a fire, but you practice the evacuation so that if the alarm ever sounds, you do not freeze in panic. You move with calm purpose. Voluntary discomfort is the fire drill for your soul. So what does this look like in practice? It is choosing the small, deliberate challenge. It is taking a cold shower for the final minute. Not because you enjoy it, but because you are practicing command over your initial flinch and complaint. It is skipping a meal and sitting with the sensation of hunger, observing it without being ruled by it, to remember that you can go without. It is walking to the store instead of driving, feeling the weather on your skin, and proving that your comfort is not so fragile. It is turning off the streaming service for an evening and sitting in quiet, or leaving your phone in another room while you eat. Each of these acts is a tiny rebellion against the expectation of constant ease. They are small victories that build a profound confidence. They whisper to you, "I am okay," even when things are not perfect. This practice does two powerful things. First, it cultivates a deep gratitude for the ordinary comforts you usually take for granted. That warm shower, that satisfying meal, that comfortable bed, they feel like gifts again, not entitlements. Second, and more importantly, it shrinks your fears about the future. When you have voluntarily faced a little cold, a little hunger, a little boredom, the prospect of those things happening by chance loses its terror. You have already been there and you remained yourself, so here is the challenge for this week. Choose one small, regular comfort and voluntarily forego it just once. It could be your morning coffee, the heater in your car, or the cushion on your favorite chair. Do not make it a grand suffering, make it a mindful experiment. In that moment of slight lack, pay attention. What story does your mind start to tell, and what happens when you simply observe that story without needing to change the channel? Imagine looking down at your life from a great height, as if you were a bird soaring high above your city. You see the grid of streets, the moving dots of cars, the tiny buildings. Your own home is just one small square among thousands. This mental shift is the fifth Stoic habit, and the ancients called it the view from above. It is a conscious exercise in perspective, a way to shrink the towering anxieties of the moment down to their true, manageable size. Marcus Aurelius returned to this practice again and again in his private writings, reminding himself to frequently take a step back and observe the human comedy from a distance. He would contemplate the vastness of the cosmos, the endless flow of time, and the countless generations that have come and gone. In that immense scale, he asked himself, what is the true weight of a missed appointment, a harsh word, or a professional setback? The purpose is not to make your life feel meaningless, but to drain the drama from your temporary troubles. It is to see that while your feelings are real, the context in which they occur is far larger than you usually perceive. When you are stuck in a traffic jam, fuming over lost time, the view from above asks you to pull the camera back. See your single car on a single road in one city on one planet spinning in a galaxy among billions. That traffic jam from this vantage point becomes a brief, almost invisible ripple. This does not solve the traffic, but it dissolves the rage that compounds the problem. The Stoics were masters of this temporal perspective as well. They would ask, will this matter in a year, in 5 years, on your final day? Most of what consumes our emotional energy today will be forgotten anecdotes if they are remembered at all. Think of a past upset that felt all-consuming at the time, a social media comment that sparked anger, a minor conflict with a coworker that ruined your week, a small mistake that filled you with shame. From your current vantage point, can you even recall the details without effort? The view from above applies that future clarity to your present moment. So here is a practical application. The next time you feel a sharp sting of insult or a swell of panic over a problem, pause. Close your eyes for just 10 seconds. In your mind, see the room you are in, then see the building, then the neighborhood, then the whole city shrinking below you, then the continent, until the planet is a blue marble hanging in the black silence of space. Watch your problem shrink with it, then stretch the timeline. See yourself a year from now, looking back on this very moment. What would that future, wiser you say about its importance? This exercise is a recalibration. It gently corrects the mind's natural tendency to magnify every threat and insult to life or death proportions. It returns you to your life not with apathy, but with a calm, steady hand, ready to address what needs addressing without the crushing weight of imagined catastrophe. What is one worry from your past that once felt enormous but now seems almost laughably small? That is the power of perspective, and it is a power you can summon at any time. This habit is about saying yes to your life exactly as it unfolds. It is the sixth practice, and the Stoics called it Amor Fati, a Latin phrase that translates to a love of one's fate. This is not passive resignation, not a shrug of the shoulders and a muttered, "Well, I guess this is my lot." It is an active, vibrant embrace. It is looking at every event, especially the obstacles and the setbacks, and choosing to see them not as interruptions to your story, but as essential chapters within it. The goal is to weave everything that happens, the smooth and the rough, into a coherent, meaningful whole. The philosopher Epictetus, born into a life of hardship, framed it as a matter of will. He said, "Do not seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for things to happen as they do, and your life will go well." This is the mental pivot from resistance to alignment. It is the difference between fighting the current and learning to read the river so you can navigate it with skill. Later thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche would powerfully adopt this Stoic idea, writing that his formula for human greatness was Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not in the future, not in the past, not for all eternity. This is the ultimate acceptance practice. It transforms barriers into fuel. Think of a tree growing on a windy cliffside. The constant, punishing wind does not destroy it. Instead, the tree adapts. Its roots dig deeper. Its trunk grows stronger and more flexible in response to the very force that seems to oppose it. The wind becomes the reason for its resilience. Amor Fati is adopting the mindset of that tree. So what does this look like in the reality of a Tuesday afternoon? Consider a job rejection. The default narrative is one of failure, of not being good enough, a story that drains your energy and confidence. Amor Fati reframes it entirely. You look at that rejection letter and you say, "This is part of my path. This was not the right fit, and the universe, in its own indirect way, has just closed a door to keep me available for the right one that is still ahead." This rejection contains a lesson, perhaps about how I present my skills, or it simply contains the gift of redirection. It is not a verdict on your worth, it is data for your journey. Another example, you plan an outdoor gathering for weeks and it rains. You can spend the day frustrated, lamenting the lost sunshine, fighting against the reality of the weather. Or you can practice Amor Fati. You say, "Yes, it is raining. This is what is happening. And because this is what is happening, we will move the party indoors, light some candles, and create a cozy, memorable experience we never would have planned." The rain becomes the reason for a better, more intimate gathering. The practice is to actively seek the hidden benefit, the alternate path, the lesson embedded within the difficulty. It is to trust that life is not happening to you, but for you, even when the packaging is rough. So here is a reflective prompt for you. Bring to mind one recent setback, large or small. It could be a missed opportunity, a minor conflict, a plan that fell apart. Now challenge yourself to reframe it through the lens of Amor Fati. Ask, if I were to love this event as a necessary part of my story, what could it be teaching me? How might this be secretly guiding me toward something else, or strengthening me in a way I cannot yet see? The answer is not about denying disappointment, but about discovering the agency that lies on the other side of acceptance. You feel an immediate surge of anger. This habit is about pausing right there, in that electric space between the spark and the flame. The seventh Stoic practice is cognitive distancing, the art of creating a mental gap between what happens and how you decide to feel about it. It is not about suppressing emotion, but about questioning the automatic story your mind rushes to tell. The Stoics called this examining your impressions. Think of your initial, raw reaction not as a command, but as a suggestion, a piece of data that needs verification before you accept it as the whole truth. Epictetus once more provides the foundational insight. He reminded his students that people are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. The event itself is neutral until your judgment colors it. Cognitive distancing is the practice of stepping back to see that coloring process in action, and then choosing whether to endorse it. Imagine this common scenario. You send a detailed email to your boss and receive a one-word reply, "Okay." Your mind instantly produces a narrative. "They ignored all my hard work. They must think it is terrible. They do not respect me." That narrative feels like reality, and it fuels a whole afternoon of resentment and deflation. The Stoic pause asks you to interrupt that cascade. Before you accept that story, you hold it at arm's length and examine it. You label it for what it is, an initial impression. Then you interrogate it with simple, gentle questions. Is this thought 100% true? What is another possible interpretation? Could my boss simply be incredibly busy or dealing with a personal matter? Perhaps they read it thoroughly and genuinely found it okay with no hidden meaning. Maybe they plan to discuss it in person later. By creating this distance, you drain the story of its absolute power. You move from "my boss disrespects me," which is a devastating and fixed conclusion, to "I am having the thought that my boss might disrespect me," which is an observation you can work with. This tiny shift is monumental. It returns the reins of your emotional state to you. Another powerful way to practice this is through what psychologists call diffusion. You literally create space between yourself and the thought. Instead of saying "I am angry," you say "I am noticing a feeling of anger arising." Instead of "I am a failure," you say "I am having the thought that I am a failure." This language change might feel awkward at first, but it is a linguistic trick that creates psychological space. It allows you to see the thought as a passing weather pattern in your mind, not as the permanent climate of your soul. So here is your reflective prompt for the next 24 hours. The next time you feel a strong, reactive emotion, whether it is irritation, jealousy, or anxiety, practice this one step. Before you act on it, simply name it to yourself as an impression. Say, "This is my initial impression of the situation." That is all. Just that one act of labeling creates the distance. In that quiet space, you will find your freedom to choose a wiser, calmer response. The eighth habit is the discipline of presence. It is the practice of directing the full force of your attention to the task or person immediately before you, pulling your mind back from its endless travels to yesterday's regrets and tomorrow's worries. The Stoics understood this as a fundamental truth of agency. The past is a memory, the future is an imagination, but the present moment is the only real territory where your actions can take root. It is the sole sphere where you have any direct influence. Marcus Aurelius wrote a powerful reminder to himself on this point, urging his focus to be confined to the present task. He instructed himself to perform each action as if it were the last of his life, with dignity and with sincere focus. This is not about dramatic intensity, but about the profound calm that comes from doing one thing at a time with your whole self. When your mind is fractured, split between a conversation you are having and an email you need to write, you are fully engaged in neither. You are performing poorly in the present while also generating anxiety about the future. Presence is the antidote to that fractured feeling. It is the decision to be exactly where you are. So what does this look like in the flow of an ordinary day? Consider a simple conversation. How often are you listening to someone while simultaneously formulating your own response, or glancing at your phone, or thinking about your next meeting? The Stoic practice of presence would be to put all of that aside, to truly listen not just to the words but to the person, to watch their expressions, to hear the tone, to be a receptive space for their thoughts. In that act of full attention, the conversation transforms. It becomes deeper, more connected, and far less stressful because you are no longer trying to manage two realities at once. The same principle applies to work. The modern cult of multitasking is a recipe for shallow results and deep exhaustion. The Stoic approach is single tasking. It is opening one document, closing all other tabs and notifications, and writing that report. It is washing the dishes and feeling the warmth of the water, noticing the shapes of the bubbles, instead of mentally rehearsing a difficult conversation for tomorrow. It is taking a walk and actually seeing the trees, hearing the birds, feeling the rhythm of your steps, instead of using the walk as mere background noise for your racing thoughts. Each of these acts is a small rebellion against distraction. They are exercises in reclaiming your own attention, which is the most precious resource you possess. The beauty of this practice is its immediacy. You can begin it in the very next minute. So here is a simple, concrete prompt. Choose one routine activity you will perform today. It could be drinking your morning tea, taking a shower, or eating a meal. For the entire duration of that activity, commit to being completely there. If you are drinking tea, just drink the tea. Notice its temperature, its aroma, its taste. When your mind wanders to your to-do list, gently guide it back to the sensation of the cup in your hands. Do not judge the wandering, just return. This is not about achieving perfect focus, but about practicing the return. In that return, you will find a quiet pocket of calm, a reminder that peace is not a destination you reach later, but a quality of attention you can bring to the task right in front of you. A fortress within your mind is not a fantasy. The ninth habit is about consciously building its walls, what Marcus Aurelius called the inner citadel. This is your ruling center, the place of ultimate retreat when the world outside grows loud and chaotic. It is not a physical space, but a psychological stronghold constructed from your deepest values and principles. When external validation disappears, when praise or criticism rains down, this inner citadel is where you stand firm, knowing who you are and what you stand for, regardless of the storm. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about returning to this inner self, describing it as the quiet place within that is untouched by the chaos of the senses and the tumult of desire. He saw it as the source of true freedom, because if your peace depends on things outside your control, it will always be fragile. But if it is anchored to principles within your control, it becomes unshakable. So how do you build this fortress? It begins with the conscious act of defining your non-negotiable virtues. These are not vague ideals like success or happiness, but actionable character traits that guide your choices. For the Stoics, these were wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Your list might be similar, or it might include compassion, integrity, curiosity, or resilience. The key is to get specific. What does courage look like for you in your daily life? Perhaps it means speaking up in a meeting when you see a better way, even if your voice shakes. What does justice mean? It could be making a fair decision that costs you personally because it is the right thing to do. When you have this clear inner compass, external events lose their power to derail you. Consider a practical example. You face intense social pressure to go along with a plan you believe is dishonest. The external forces are powerful. The fear of rejection is real. But if honesty is a cornerstone of your inner citadel, the decision, while difficult, becomes clear. You might feel anxiety, but you will not feel confusion about who you are. You retreat to your fortress, consult your principle, and act from that solid ground. The criticism that follows might sting, but it cannot breach your walls because your self-worth is not tied to their approval. It is tied to your fidelity to your own code. Another example is navigating professional failure. If your sense of worth is built on the citadel of resilience and continuous learning, a failed project is not an indictment of your value. It is valuable data. You can process the disappointment from within your stronghold, learn the lesson, and plan your next move without collapsing into shame. Your inner citadel turns potential disasters into difficult but manageable challenges. So here is your reflective prompt, a practical step in the construction. Take a moment to write down 2 or 3 virtues you want to form the unshakable core of your character. Be precise. Do not just write kindness. Write, I will practice kindness by listening fully without interruption, especially when I disagree. Do not just write strength. Write, I will practice strength by acknowledging my fears and acting with integrity anyway. Keep this short list somewhere you will see it. These are the blueprints for your fortress. In moments of doubt or pressure, you can look at them and remember what you are building and why no external storm can ever tear it down. In a world urging you to want more, this habit is a deliberate practice of appreciating enough. The 10th Stoic habit is practicing gratitude as a form of contentment. This is not the fleeting feeling of thankfulness when something good happens. It is an active, daily discipline of acknowledging the sufficiency of what is already present in your life. The Stoics saw this as a direct antidote to the restless hunger for more, a way to inoculate the mind against the poison of complaint and envy. It is the conscious choice to find wealth in what you possess rather than poverty in what you lack. Seneca wrote powerfully on this, advising in his letters that true wealth is not found in great possessions, but in few wants. He observed that it is not the person who has too little who is poor, but the one who desires more. This shifts gratitude from a reaction to a foundation. It is about building your sense of security on the bedrock of what you already have, which is always within your control, rather than the shifting sands of what you might acquire, which is not. The philosopher Epictetus, beginning life in a position of very little, taught his students to regularly remember that everything you have is a gift, not a guarantee. He urged them to practice saying of every simple pleasure, "This too I shall lose." This might sound somber, but its effect is the opposite. By remembering the temporary nature of all things, you are jolted into a vivid appreciation for their presence right now. It turns an ordinary meal into a feast, a familiar view into a masterpiece, a routine day of health into a profound gift. The practice is beautifully simple. It is the daily, mental or written inventory of specific, ordinary sufficiencies. Do not just think, "I am grateful for my health." Get specific. "I am grateful that my legs carried me up the stairs today without pain." "I am grateful for the warmth of this coffee in my hands on a cool morning." "I am grateful for the 5 minutes of quiet I found before the day began." "I am grateful for the lesson I learned from yesterday's mistake, which made me wiser today." This specificity trains your attention to mine for gold in the soil of your everyday life. It rewires your perception. Where you once saw a mundane commute, you might now notice the play of light through the trees or appreciate the reliable functioning of your vehicle. Where you once felt annoyance at a household chore, you might feel gratitude for the clean water from your tap or the shelter that contains your life. This practice does not ignore life's difficulties. It simply refuses to let them monopolize your narrative. It ensures that your mental landscape is not a barren field of lack, but a garden where good things, however small, are noticed and tended. So here is your reflective prompt, a direct application for tonight. Before you close your eyes to sleep, do not review your worries. Instead, mentally express sincere gratitude for 3 ordinary things from your day. They must be simple and concrete. The taste of your dinner, the sound of a loved one's laughter, the feeling of your pillow under your head. As you name each one, pause for just a second to truly feel the appreciation for it. This small act is a quiet rebellion against the culture of endless wanting. It is you declaring for this moment that you have enough, that you are enough, and that this is where your calm begins. This habit uses the awareness of life's finitude as a tool for living fully. It is the 11th practice, known by its Latin name, Memento Mori, which translates to remember you must die. For the Stoics, this was not a morbid fixation or a source of fear. It was the ultimate clarifier, a lens that brought the most important things into sharp focus while dissolving the trivial distractions that so often consume our days. It is a call to action, a daily whisper that strips away pettiness and procrastination by reminding us that our time here is precious and non-renewable. Marcus Aurelius returned to this contemplation again and again in his private writings, not to despair but to ignite purpose. He wrote that you could leave life right now and let that determine what you do and say and think. He urged himself to act as if he were at the point of passing, a man who would be ashamed if anything in his soul should rebel against departing life. This perspective is not about an ending, but about the quality of the story being written right up until that final page. It asks a simple, profound question. If you knew this day held a finite number, how would you choose to spend its hours? The practice transforms procrastination from a harmless delay into a theft of your own irreplaceable life. Think of how it changes your approach to a difficult but necessary conversation. You have been putting it off, fearing awkwardness or conflict. But with Memento Mori in mind, you consider the weight of unsaid words, of truth withheld, of a relationship left unresolved. Remembering that your time and theirs is limited, you find the courage to speak with honesty and kindness today, because tomorrow is never promised. The same applies to a creative project you have been dreaming about for years. The voice that says, "I will start when I have more time, when I am more skilled, when conditions are perfect," is exposed as a fiction. The awareness that your days are numbered asks, if not now, then when? It pushes you to take the first small, imperfect step today, because this day is the only one you are guaranteed to have. This contemplation also reframes daily irritations. Stuck in a long line, dealing with a minor bureaucratic hassle, feeling slighted by an offhand comment, these frustrations lose their power to ruin an hour when held against the vast backdrop of a single, precious life. Is this how you want to spend a fragment of your limited attention? The answer is almost always a clear and calming no. So here is your reflective prompt, a direct application of this powerful lens. If you carried the conscious awareness that your time here was truly limited, what one trivial concern, one minor resentment, or one empty distraction would you immediately drop from your mental load? Identify it, and for the rest of today, practice letting it go, not because it does not exist, but because in the grand narrative of your life, it simply does not merit a starring role. Think of your mind as having a gatekeeper. This 12th habit is training that gatekeeper with precision and care. The Stoics called this the Discipline of Assent. It is the active, conscious choice to either grant or withhold your inner agreement to the thoughts and impressions that first arise in your mind. Where cognitive distancing is about creating space, the Discipline of Assent is about making a deliberate decision within that space. It is the proactive counterpart, the moment you decide whether to let a thought through the gate and into the citadel of your beliefs. The philosopher Epictetus taught that our rational faculty has two primary powers. The first is the power of assent, the ability to say yes or no to an impression. The second is the power of choice, to act on that judgment. He argued that the quality of our entire life depends on the quality of our assent. If we automatically agree with every fearful or angry impression that knocks, we hand over the keys to our peace. This practice is about taking those keys back. It means treating your initial reactions not as truth, but as propositions. They are suggestions from a part of your mind that is often reactive, biased, and fearful. Your job as the gatekeeper is to examine the credentials of each suggestion before you allow it entry. Does it have evidence? Is it rational? Is it serving your well-being? If not, you respectfully decline. Consider a practical application. You are about to give a presentation, and as you stand up, a wave of anxiety hits. The initial automatic impression shouts, "You are going to embarrass yourself. Everyone will see you are not qualified. This is a catastrophe." The untrained mind immediately assents. It agrees, yes, this is a catastrophe, and the body floods with panic. The Stoic gatekeeper intercepts that impression at the door. It holds it up for examination. Is it 100% true that I will embarrass myself? No, that is a prediction, not a fact. Is everyone going to think I am unqualified? That is a mind-reading assumption about others I cannot possibly verify. Is this a catastrophe? No, a catastrophe is a life-altering disaster. This is a challenging situation I am equipped to handle. Having examined it, you consciously withhold your assent from the catastrophic story. Instead, you grant your assent to a truer, more rational impression. This is an important moment. I feel nervous, which is normal. I am prepared. I will focus on delivering the value I have to share. The event is the same, but the inner experience is transformed from a crisis into a manageable challenge. You feel the nerves, but you are not ruled by the panic. Another everyday example is receiving a terse text message from a friend. The initial impression might be, they are angry with me. I must have done something wrong. The gatekeeper pauses that thought. What is the actual evidence? The text is short, that is all. Could there be a dozen other reasons for a short text? They are busy, they are driving, their battery is low, they are simply preoccupied. By withholding immediate assent from the story of anger, you prevent a cascade of worry and perhaps a defensive reply. You can then choose a rational response, like sending a simple, kind follow-up. So here is your challenge for tomorrow. Choose to be a gatekeeper for just one thought. When you catch yourself making an automatic negative assumption, like this day is ruined or I cannot handle this, pause. Ask it for its credentials. Is this impression rational and completely true? If not, consciously withhold your agreement. See if you can formulate a truer, more balanced statement to grant your assent to instead. That single act of conscious choice is the repetition that builds an unshakable inner authority. The Stoics saw humans not as isolated islands, but as leaves on the same tree. This 13th habit is the practice of Sympatheia, a profound sense of interconnectedness with other people and the cosmos itself. It is the recognition that we are all part of a single, living system, sharing the same fundamental nature and the same ultimate fate. This perspective dissolves the illusion of separation that fuels so much of our resentment, judgment, and loneliness. When you feel deeply connected, patience and compassion become a natural response, not a forced obligation. Your sense of self expands to include the well-being of the whole. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea constantly, reminding himself to frequently contemplate the mutual interdependence of all things. He saw the universe as a single living being with one soul, and all of us as its limbs and organs. He wrote that what brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee. This is the Stoic foundation for a sense of duty to the common good. It is not about self-sacrifice from a place of lack, but about intelligent contribution from a place of belonging. You care for the hive because you are the hive. Practicing Sympatheia transforms how you move through a crowded, often frustrating world. Consider the flash of road rage. Another driver cuts you off. The default, isolated narrative is one of personal insult, of a selfish individual who has wronged you specifically. Sympatheia asks you to widen the lens. That driver is not an obstacle in your story, but a fellow human in the middle of their own. Perhaps they are rushing to a sick child, or they are exhausted after a double shift and made a simple error, or they are lost and anxious. This does not excuse dangerous driving, but it completely changes your emotional reaction. The anger dissipates into a calmer, more pragmatic caution. You see a person, not a problem. The same shift applies during a heated disagreement. When you are locked in conflict, it is easy to demonize the other person, to see them as the embodiment of the opinion you hate. Sympatheia asks you to look past the opinion to the shared human beneath it. This person, like you, wants to be heard and understood. Like you, they have experienced pain and formed beliefs to protect themselves. Like you, they are doing the best they can with the information and emotional state they have in this moment. This does not mean you must agree with them. It means you engage with them as a fellow leaf on the same tree, not as an enemy to be defeated. The goal shifts from winning an argument to understanding a perspective, which often is the only real path to resolution. So here is a reflective prompt, a direct application of this expansive view. Bring to mind one person you are currently in conflict with or feel distant from. It could be a coworker, a family member, or even a public figure. Now, set aside the point of disagreement for a moment. Ask yourself, what fundamental human experiences do we unquestionably share? We both know the feeling of disappointment. We both have felt fear. We both desire safety and respect. We both will, one day, face loss. In recognizing that shared bedrock of experience, what happens to the solid wall of separation between you? It begins to feel less like a fortress and more like a fence, something that can be seen through and with effort, perhaps even crossed. In an age of constant sharing, this 14th habit is about dignified, silent strength. It is the art of silent endurance, the practice of bearing difficulty with quiet fortitude and without complaint. This is not about suffering in isolation or refusing to ask for help when it is truly needed. It is about reserving your energy for solving the problem rather than amplifying your own discomfort by narrating it to the world. The Stoics saw the ability to endure hardship well as a mark of true character, a sign that your inner citadel was strong enough to withstand the siege without sending up constant smoke signals of distress. They contrasted this with a common tendency to seek sympathy, to turn every minor inconvenience into a public performance of suffering, which only serves to reinforce the feeling of victimhood and drain the energy needed for a solution. Seneca wrote beautifully on this point, observing that a great person is one who can bear hardship well. He argued that to be upset by what you must bear is to add a second suffering on top of the first. The first is the actual difficulty, the second is the complaint about it. Silent endurance is the decision to carry only the first load and to carry it with grace. Think of it as an internalization of struggle for the purpose of building character, not for the purpose of gathering an audience. The Stoic sage was not a statue feeling no pain. He was a person who felt the sting of the cold, the weight of the burden, the ache of disappointment, but who chose to meet these sensations with a focused, quiet resolve. His energy went into moving forward, not into lamenting the road. So what does this look like in a practical sense? It begins with the smallest of daily trials. You are working on a tedious, repetitive task. The automatic impulse is to sigh, to comment on how boring it is, to seek commiseration from a coworker. The practice of silent endurance is to simply do the task, to focus your mind on the rhythm of the work itself, to find a small point of focus or learning within it, and to complete it without a single verbal complaint. You feel the boredom, but you do not feed it with your words. Another example is enduring a minor physical discomfort. You are slightly too cold in a room or slightly too warm on a walk. Instead of immediately announcing your discomfort and adjusting the thermostat for everyone or stopping to remove a layer, you first sit with the sensation. You observe it, you prove to yourself that you can tolerate it, that this mild deviation from perfect comfort is not an emergency. You discover that your capacity for endurance is far greater than your initial impulse to complain suggested. This practice builds a profound inner confidence. It whispers to you, "I can handle more than I think." It transforms you from someone who is constantly buffeted by and broadcasting every minor wave of discomfort into someone who stands steady in a storm, conserving energy for what truly matters. The energy you once spent on vocalizing your suffering is now available for clear thought and effective action. So here is your reflective prompt for today. Make it a point of awareness to notice one instance of non-essential complaining. It could be about the weather, a long line, a slow internet connection. When you feel the urge to voice that complaint, pause. Choose, just for that one instance, to endure it in silence. Simply bear the moment without commentary. Observe what happens inside you. Does the frustration dissipate faster when you do not give it a microphone? That quiet space you create is where real strength begins to grow. This habit uses an imagined ideal as a compass for your behavior. The 15th practice is contemplating the ideal sage. This is not about creating an impossible standard to feel inadequate against, but about establishing a clear North Star for your own moral and mental development. The Stoics spoke often of the sage, a figure of perfect wisdom and virtue, not as a historical person they knew, but as a conceptual model, a living illustration of what it looks like when human reason operates at its highest potential. To contemplate this ideal is to ask a simple, powerful question: what would the best version of myself do here? It provides direction when your own emotions or biases might cloud the path. Think of a ship's captain navigating by the stars. The stars are fixed points of light, impossibly distant, yet by aligning with them, the captain can chart a true course across a dark and shifting sea. The ideal sage is that fixed star for your character. You are not expected to become the star, but you can use its steady light to correct your course again and again. The writings of the Stoics are filled with these aspirational references. They describe the sage as someone who is free from passion, who meets every event with calm understanding, who acts with justice not out of obligation but from natural inclination. Seneca wrote letters exploring what such a person would be like, using the concept to illuminate the gap between ordinary human frailty and philosophical excellence. The key is to hold this ideal lightly as a guide, not a club. It is for inspiration, not for self-flagellation. The moment you use it to criticize yourself for not being perfect, you have missed the point. Its purpose is to pull you forward, not to push you down. So how do you apply this in a practical, daily way? When you find yourself in a challenging situation, pause and consciously invoke this mental model. You are facing a petty provocation from a colleague. Your initial reaction is to snap back with a clever, cutting remark. Before you speak, you ask internally, how would the ideal wise person, someone governed by perfect reason and justice, respond to this? The answer that arises likely would not involve a cutting remark. It might involve a calm question to clarify the issue, or a graceful deflection, or a simple refusal to engage in the pettiness. The ideal sage helps you see a higher road that your initial irritation had obscured. Similarly, when you are tempted by a short-term gratification that conflicts with your long-term goals, you can invoke the sage. Faced with the temptation to skip your planned workout for another hour of passive entertainment, you ask, what would a person of perfect self-discipline and respect for their own well-being choose? The answer becomes clearer. This practice gives you a moment of leverage against your own impulses. It creates a space between stimulus and response where you can consult a wiser version of yourself. So here is your reflective prompt, a step toward defining your own North Star. In a few simple words, describe the core qualities of your personal ideal sage. What 3 or 4 attributes matter most? Perhaps it is unshakable calm, radical kindness, fierce integrity, or gentle courage. Write those words down. They are not a judgment on who you are now, but a description of the light you are steering by. The next time you face a difficult choice, simply remember those words and let them point the way. Words shape our reality. This habit is about using neutral, accurate language to describe what happens around you, stripping away the emotional charge that so often amplifies our suffering. The 16th Stoic practice is objective description. It is the discipline of seeing events as they are, in their plain, factual form, before your judgments rush in to color them with alarm or insult. Marcus Aurelius was a master of this mental exercise. He would constantly remind himself to break things down, to see objects for their simple material nature and events for their straightforward causes. He wrote that you should define or describe every object that presents itself to your imagination, so that you may see it as it truly is in its entirety. This is not a cold, robotic denial of feeling. It is a strategic pause that allows you to respond to the facts of a situation, rather than to your inflamed interpretation of those facts. The gap between what happens and the story we tell about it is where most of our emotional turbulence lies. Objective description narrows that gap. Consider the powerful difference between two statements describing the same event. The first is laden with judgment. My presentation was a complete disaster. That sentence carries a heavy weight of failure, embarrassment, and finality. It feels like a verdict on your entire capability. Now apply objective description. Strip it back to the observable, verifiable facts. Some parts of my presentation did not go as planned. The technology faltered during the second slide, and I noticed two audience members checking their phones. That is it. That is what actually happened. The first statement, my presentation was a disaster, is a story you have authored, a sweeping narrative that likely triggers shame and anxiety. The second is a simple report. It contains the same core events, but it holds no inherent emotional charge. It presents data, not drama. From that clear-eyed vantage point, you can now ask useful questions. Why did the technology falter? How can I better prepare for that next time? Why might those individuals have been distracted? Was it my content, their schedules, or something else entirely? The emotional storm clears and the space for rational problem-solving opens. This practice applies to interpersonal conflicts with equal power. Instead of telling yourself, my partner is so selfish and never listens, you would describe the facts. I expressed a concern about our schedule 3 times this evening, and each time the conversation shifted to a different topic before a resolution was reached. The first version paints a permanent, damning portrait of a person. The second describes a specific, observable pattern of behavior. One leads to resentment and helplessness. The other can lead to a calm, focused conversation. Honey, I have noticed that when I bring up scheduling, our talks tend to shift direction. Can we find 5 minutes now to lock this down? The shift is subtle but transformative. You are no longer fighting a monster of your own creation. You are addressing a manageable situation. So here is your reflective prompt, a direct application of this linguistic discipline. Take a current worry or frustration you are carrying. Now, challenge yourself to write one single sentence that describes the situation in purely factual, observable terms. No adjectives that judge, like terrible or unfair. No mind reading like they meant to hurt me. Just the plain facts of what occurred. In that sentence, you will likely find the first breath of calm because you have just separated the event from the story. The event remains, but the story, it turns out, was optional. That space between what happens and what you do is a frontier of freedom. This 17th habit is about deliberately widening that frontier, instituting a mandatory pause before you respond. It is the practical, physical expression of the cognitive distance we have discussed. It is where theory meets the moment, where you move from understanding the gap to actually living inside it. The Stoics saw this brief silence not as hesitation, but as the essential ground where reason can be heard over the noise of impulse. It is the buffer that prevents a spark from becoming a wildfire. Seneca wrote extensively on this, particularly regarding anger. He advised that the best cure for anger is delay, to give the initial passion time to subside. He suggested that when you feel the heat of anger rising, you should force your first impulse to be to keep quiet. Do not grant your tongue permission to speak until your mind has had a chance to settle. This pause is the guardian of your virtue, ensuring your actions are chosen, not merely triggered. The practice is beautifully simple in design, yet profoundly difficult in execution, because it asks you to resist the powerful, immediate pull of reaction. It is the discipline of inaction as a precursor to right action. So what does this look like in the flow of a real day? It begins with the smallest of commitments. When you receive a critical email that makes your blood pressure rise, your finger immediately wants to fly across the keyboard with a defensive or equally sharp reply. The habit of the pause intervenes. You close the email, you stand up and walk to get a glass of water, you take 3 slow, deliberate breaths, You count to 10 not as a childish exercise but as a deliberate reset for your nervous system. Only then do you reopen the email and consider a response. In that space, the initial surge of emotion has often softened, and you can see the content more clearly, perhaps spotting the valid concern buried in the poor delivery, or crafting a reply that addresses the issue without escalating the conflict. The same principle applies in person. A child acts out breaking a household rule. The immediate reaction might be to raise your voice in frustration. The pause is the moment you physically turn away, take that deep breath, and feel your feet on the floor. In that silence, you reconnect with your intention to guide, not just to chastise. Your subsequent words will carry more authority and less anger, and they will be far more effective. This buffer transforms potential conflicts into moments of connection. Consider a disagreement with a partner. They say something that feels like a personal attack. The reactive mind wants to fire back with a counterattack to win the point. The pause is where you consciously bite your tongue. You might even say, "I need a moment to think about that." Then you leave the room. In that space, you can separate their poorly chosen words from their likely intent, and you can choose a response that seeks understanding rather than victory. You return not with ammunition, but with a question. So here is your direct prompt, a challenge for your very next interaction. In your next conversation that carries even a hint of charge, whether it is with a colleague, a family member, or a stranger, institute this one rule. Before you speak, you must first take one full, silent breath. In the space of that breath, ask yourself one question: is what I am about to say true, necessary, and kind? That tiny buffer, that conscious breath, is the training ground for a lifetime of calm, reasoned response. The 18th habit asks you to look up at the stars or study a leaf. This practice of studying nature and the cosmos is not about becoming a scientist, but about becoming a student of the grand design. It is an invitation to step outside the cramped theater of your personal concerns and into the vast, orderly amphitheater of the universe. For the Stoics, nature was not a random collection of things, but the visible expression of a divine, rational principle they called the logos. To observe nature was to witness reason in action, to see a deep, intelligent order that could guide your own life toward harmony. Marcus Aurelius constantly turned his gaze outward for this very reason. He wrote of contemplating the stars as if running alongside them, and of considering the rapid passing and transformation of all things, like the endless cycles of the seasons. He did this to remind himself of his small but connected place in a magnificent whole, a perspective that dissolved anxiety and fostered a calm acceptance of life's inevitable flow. When you feel overwhelmed by a problem, its scale feels absolute, but under the night sky or before the relentless, gentle growth of a tree, you are offered a different measurement. Your worry does not vanish, but it is placed in a context so vast that its power to consume you diminishes. You see that you are part of a system that operates on scales of time and space that humble the human ego, and in that humility lies a profound peace. A practical way to cultivate this is to build a tiny ritual of observation into your day. It could be watching the sunrise with the specific intention of noting its predictable, silent arrival. It could be following the progress of a single plant on your windowsill from sprout to leaf, observing its patient, ordered growth. As you watch, reflect on two things. First, reflect on the order. Notice the intricate, non-negotiable laws at play: the need for light, water, the turning of the earth. This is the logos in miniature, a reminder that a rational structure underpins reality. Second, reflect on transience. That brilliant sunrise will fade to noon. That leaf will one day wilt and fall. This is not sad but liberating. It ties directly to Memento Mori, reminding you that your own life is a brief, beautiful point in this endless cycle. This dual awareness of sublime order and gentle impermanence grounds you. It tells you that your struggles are both a part of a meaningful whole and a temporary passage within it. So here is a direct invitation. Sometime in the next 24 hours, give yourself just 5 minutes. Go outside or simply look out a window at the sky. Watch the clouds move or the branches sway or the stars appear. As you do, let this question sit quietly in your mind without forcing an answer. In the face of all this, what is my true place and what is my real responsibility? The stillness that follows is not empty. It is the sound of your mind aligning with a rhythm much older and wiser than any of your daily concerns. We are flooded with inputs. This 19th habit is about building a filter for your attention, a conscious curation of the information, opinions, and stimuli you allow into your mind. It is applying the dichotomy of control directly to your mental diet. You cannot control the endless stream of news alerts, social media feeds, and opinions that the world generates every second, but you can control the volume knob and you can choose which channels you tune into. This is not about ignorance but about selective engagement. It is the practice of protecting your most valuable resource, your focus, so you can direct it toward what truly builds your life rather than having it scattered by 1,000 distractions. Seneca wrote extensively on the corrupting influence of the crowd, warning that we need to retreat into ourselves to find our own standard. He was not advocating for isolation, but for periodic solitude to escape the constant pressure of other people's values and the noise of public opinion. He saw that without this filter, our minds become a public square, filled with the shouting of strangers, leaving no room for our own thoughts to breathe. The goal is to create enough quiet inside so you can hear your own wisdom. So what does this look like in a world of perpetual connection? It begins with a simple audit. Look at the information you consume not for its content but for its effect. Does scrolling through a particular social feed leave you feeling anxious, envious, or agitated? That is not information, it is noise, and it is eroding your tranquility. Does checking the news first thing in the morning seed your day with a sense of helpless dread? That is a choice you can reconsider. Practical application means instituting boundaries. It could be a digital sunset where you turn off all screens an hour before bed, trading the blue light of headlines for the soft light of a book. It might mean designating 1 or 2 specific times to check the news, rather than letting it be a constant background drip of crisis. It could be choosing to mute notifications from apps that fragment your attention into useless confetti. It also applies to the conversations you choose to engage in. Gossip, for instance, is a form of social noise. It pulls you into judgments about people and situations that are often outside your control, and it rarely leaves you feeling stronger or kinder. The Stoic filter asks, does participating in this conversation serve my virtue or my tranquility? If the answer is no, you have the power to gently change the subject or excuse yourself. The space you create by limiting this noise is not empty, it is fertile ground. It is where your own ideas can take root, where your calm can solidify, and where you can finally hear the quiet voice of your own purpose. So here is your reflective prompt for this week. Identify one source of noise in your life. It could be a particular app, a 24-hour news channel, or even a recurring conversational topic that drains your energy. What would happen if you consciously reduced your exposure to it by just 50%? The silence that follows might feel uncomfortable at first, but in that discomfort, you may just discover the sound of your own mind thinking clearly again. This habit involves a simple, silent phrase you add to every goal. It is the 20th practice, known as the reserve clause. The idea is to append a mental caveat to all your plans and endeavors, a quiet acknowledgement that the final outcome is not yours to command. You commit fully to your effort while simultaneously releasing your rigid attachment to a specific result. The Stoics called this conditional willing. You will your action, but you condition your expectation on the cooperation of a universe filled with factors beyond your control. Epictetus taught this with beautiful clarity. He advised his students to pursue their aims while adding the words, "If nothing prevents me." He said, "I will sail across the ocean if nothing prevents me." This does not mean you board the ship half-heartedly. You pack your bags, you study the charts, you give the voyage your all. But you also hold in your heart the understanding that a storm may arise, or the ship may need repairs, or any number of unseen events could change the course. Your commitment is to the sailing, not solely to the landing on a distant shore. Seneca echoed this, writing that the wise person loves their plans, but ties them all to the condition, "If nothing shall occur to the contrary." This mental framing is a masterstroke against frustration. It separates your sphere of control, which is your effort and intention, from the sphere of the unpredictable, which is the final outcome. When you fuse these two spheres together, you set yourself up for suffering. You believe that because you worked hard, you are owed a specific result. The universe, however, does not deal in debts and guarantees. The reserve clause gently untangles this knot. It allows you to strive with total heart, while making peace with the fact that the world may have other plans. Consider a practical, everyday application. You plan an elaborate picnic for the weekend. You prepare the food, invite friends, and select the perfect spot. As you make these plans, you silently add the clause, "weather permitting." This does not dampen your excitement or your preparation. You still make the sandwiches and pack the blanket. But when you wake up Saturday to the sound of rain, your disappointment is manageable, not catastrophic. The reserve clause has already prepared your mind for this possibility. You are not betrayed by the universe. The condition was simply not met. So you pivot gracefully to a cozy indoor plan, your effort transferred but not wasted. Now apply it to a larger life endeavor like pursuing a promotion. You work diligently, you take on extra projects, you prepare for the interview, you give it your absolute best. And as you do, you hold the thought, fate permitting. You acknowledge that company restructuring, a sudden budget freeze, or the unique preferences of a hiring manager are factors outside your command. If you receive the promotion, you are grateful, not arrogantly entitled. If you do not, while disappointment is natural, your sense of self is not shattered. You can honestly assess your performance within your sphere, learn from it, and redirect your energy without feeling that the world is unjust. Your worth was never tied to that single outcome. So here is your reflective prompt, a way to weave this clause into your own narrative. Bring to mind one current plan or goal you are actively working toward. It could be finishing a project, improving a relationship, or achieving a personal milestone. Now, consciously attach the reserve clause to it. Say to yourself, "I will see this through with all my effort, fate permitting." Feel the subtle shift that occurs. The goal remains, but the brittle tension around it softens. You are still the dedicated captain of your ship, but you have just acknowledged the vastness and the mystery of the sea. The goal is not to feel nothing. It is to feel everything without being overthrown by the storm. This 21st habit is the cultivation of Apatheia, a state of clear-minded equanimity. The word sounds like apathy, but in Stoic philosophy it means the very opposite. Apathy is a lack of feeling, a dull indifference. Apatheia is a freedom from destructive passions, those irrational, excessive emotions that hijack your reason and cloud your judgment. It is about achieving a calm clarity where you experience feelings without being enslaved by them. The Stoics were not aiming for a robotic existence. They sought Eupatheia, which translates to good feelings, the rational, healthy emotions that arise from a life lived with virtue. Think of joy instead of giddy mania, caution instead of paralyzing fear, and a wish for good instead of a desperate, grasping desire. The goal was to be moved by life, not shattered by it. Seneca wrote extensively on this distinction, particularly regarding anger. He called anger a brief madness and argued that no plague has cost the human race more. He was not saying you should never feel irritation or a sense of injustice. He was warning against the wildfire of rage that burns down your own inner peace first. Apatheia is the firebreak. It is the cultivated space where you can feel the heat of the emotion without letting it consume the forest of your mind. So what does this look like when a destructive passion begins to rise? Consider envy. You see a peer receive recognition you believe you deserve. The initial sting is natural, a flash of comparison. The untrained mind, ruled by passion, spirals from that sting into a narrative of unfairness, into resentment toward the person, into a sinking feeling of personal inadequacy. That spiral is the passion. The practice of Apatheia asks you to observe that initial sting with detachment. You acknowledge, I am feeling a pang of envy. Then you gently question the story it is telling. Is this feeling based on a rational assessment or on an irrational desire for external validation? Does this person's success truly diminish my own? By creating this space, you prevent the sting from becoming a poison. You can then choose to redirect that energy into a rational, virtuous action, perhaps offering genuine congratulations and then refocusing on your own meaningful work. Another powerful example is fear, particularly the kind that morphs into anxiety about future events you cannot control. The passion of fear shouts catastrophic predictions. Apatheia does not deny the feeling of concern. It simply refuses to let that concern write the script. It responds with reason, examining what is actually within your control right now, and taking a small, constructive step based on that, rather than spinning in the whirlwind of imagined futures. This cultivation is a daily practice of gentle interruption. It is noticing when an emotion is beginning to drive the car and quietly asking reason to take back the wheel. So here is your reflective prompt, a step toward this clear-minded freedom. Identify one destructive passion that most often disrupts your inner calm. Give it a simple name, like the critic for excessive self-judgment, or the storm for flashes of rage, or the spiral for anxiety. For the next week, simply practice noticing when it arises. Do not fight it, just observe its arrival, and in that moment of observation, whisper to yourself, this is a passion, not a command. That single act of naming and noticing is the seed of true equanimity. Stoic calm is not a selfish retreat. This 20-second habit turns your inner strength into outward contribution, the practice of philanthropy in its original sense, a love of humanity. It is the active engagement in acts of kindness, service, and goodwill, not as a transaction for praise, but as a fundamental duty and a profound source of meaning. The Stoics believed deeply in our social nature. We are born for cooperation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To act against another, he said, is to act against nature. Helping others, therefore, is not an optional extra for a good life. It is a natural function of a healthy soul, as natural as a vine producing grapes. To withhold this function is to wither a part of yourself. This practice reinforces the interconnectedness we contemplated earlier, making the abstract feeling of Sympatheia tangible through action. When you contribute, you are not draining your own reserves. You are exercising the muscle of your humanity, and in doing so, you strengthen your own character. It reminds you that your capacity for good is a power entirely within your control, a reliable source of dignity regardless of external circumstances. The application is beautifully simple and quietly revolutionary. It is patient listening when you are tempted to interrupt with your own story. It is sharing a piece of useful knowledge or a resource with someone without needing them to know it came from you. It could be an anonymous small act like paying for the coffee of the person behind you in line, or leaving a genuinely encouraging note for a coworker to find. It is offering your seat, holding a door, or simply offering a warm, undistracted smile to a stranger who looks burdened. The key is the intention, the conscious choice to extend your circle of concern by one small, practical action. The Stoic does this not for thanks, but because it is what a rational, social being does. It is the vine producing its grapes. So here is your direct prompt, a chance to put this natural function into motion. Today, perform one small, intentional act of kindness without announcing it. Do not post about it, do not seek recognition. Let the act itself be its own complete reward. In that quiet offering, you will feel the truth of your connection, and your inner citadel will feel not like a lonely fortress, but like a welcoming home. The obstacle is not a detour, it is the path itself. This 23rd habit embodies a powerful modern paraphrase of Marcus Aurelius: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is the active, gritty sibling of Amor Fati. Where Amor Fati is about loving your fate, this practice is about wrestling with it, about seeing every hindrance not as a frustrating block, but as the essential raw material you were meant to work with. The obstacle is not a sign you are going the wrong direction. It is the very terrain you must cross to reach your destination. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal that a blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. He saw the obstacle as the fuel. This mindset transforms your relationship with difficulty from one of resistance to one of engagement. The creative block is no longer a wall stopping your progress. It is an invitation to practice the virtue of persistence, to try a new approach, to sit in the discomfort of not knowing until a fresh idea sparks. The difficult person in your life is not an error in the universe's design. They are a precise opportunity to practice the virtue of patience, to exercise understanding, to strengthen your capacity for compassion under pressure. Even a delay, like a cancelled flight, shifts from a stolen day to a chance to practice the virtue of temperance, to manage your frustration with grace, and to discover unexpected pockets of peace in an airport lounge. The obstacle presents the question, and your virtuous response is the answer. So here is your reflective prompt, a direct application of this transformative lens. Name one current obstacle you are facing. It could be a logistical problem, a skill gap, or an interpersonal tension. Now, do not ask how to remove it. Instead, ask this: if this obstacle is the way, what specific virtue does it invite me to practice? Does it call for courage to have a hard conversation, for creativity to find a new solution, for justice to stand up for what is right? Brainstorm one small action you could take today that uses the obstacle as the raw material for building that virtue. In that shift, you reclaim authorship of your story. The roadblock becomes the road. Words are currency. This habit is about spending them wisely and sparingly. The 24th practice is a poverty of speech, a deliberate economy of words that conserves your energy and protects your inner peace. It is the discipline of speaking less with far greater purpose and clarity, while consciously avoiding the drains of gossip, complaint, and unnecessary argument. This is not about being shy or withholding important truths. It is about applying the Stoic virtue of temperance to your tongue, understanding that every word you utter is a withdrawal from your finite reserve of attention and intention. When you speak carelessly, you scatter your power. When you speak with purpose, you focus it. The Stoics saw idle talk as a form of pollution for the mind. Seneca warned that to be everywhere is to be nowhere, and that the person who chases after all words and all conversations scatters their life. He advised that we should guard our speech, for it reveals our character more clearly than any action. The founder of Stoicism, Zeno, was famously concise, believing that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we might listen twice as much as we speak. This habit, then, is a shift from broadcasting to receiving, from asserting to understanding. It is the recognition that most arguments are not won with more words, but dissolved with better listening. Consider a practical application in a team meeting. The common impulse is to speak quickly to establish presence, to fill silence with commentary, to ensure your voice is heard. The practice of poverty of speech asks you to pause, listen fully to what others are saying, not just to prepare your own response. When you do speak, let it be to ask a clarifying question that deepens the discussion for everyone, or to offer a single, concise point that moves the decision forward. Your words become valuable because they are rare and precise, not because they are plentiful. Another powerful arena is gossip. That seemingly harmless conversation about someone who is not present is a triple cost. It costs your integrity as you engage in judgment outside your control. It costs your energy as you invest emotion in a narrative that does not serve you. And it costs your peace as you invite negativity into your own mind. The Stoic simply chooses not to spend their currency there. They might change the subject with a gentle, "I would not feel comfortable speculating," or offer a neutral observation that redirects the talk toward more constructive ground. Even in conflict, this practice holds power. When faced with a provocation, the impoverished speech is a calm, factual statement, or sometimes a deliberate and thoughtful silence. This silence is not weakness, it is immense strength. It refuses to escalate, it denies the other person the noisy battle they may expect, and it preserves your calm for the actions that truly matter. So here is your reflective prompt, a direct experiment in this economy. In one conversation today, perhaps with a colleague or a family member, make a conscious choice to listen more and speak less. Let your goal be to understand, not to be understood. Notice the urge to interrupt, to correct, to share your own story, and gently set it aside. Just listen. In the quiet space you create, you may discover you hear not only them more clearly, but your own wisdom as well. A toolkit needs upkeep. The final daily habit is nourishing your mind with wisdom. This is the 25th practice, the regular study of Stoic texts. It is not about collecting ancient quotes like trophies. It is about maintaining a living conversation with the philosophers, a dialogue that keeps their principles fresh, sharp, and directly applicable to your ever-changing life. This habit is the maintenance schedule for your inner citadel, ensuring its walls remain strong and its gates function smoothly. The Stoics themselves were relentless students and writers. Marcus Aurelius did not compose his meditations for publication. He wrote them as a personal notebook, a nightly dialogue with himself to reinforce his own understanding. Seneca penned his letters as ongoing lessons for a friend. Their writings were not finished doctrines, but active exercises in thinking. By reading them, you are not receiving a static lecture. You are joining a practice that is 2,000 years young. Approach a page of Stoic text not as a passive reader, but as an active participant. You are engaging with a thought, testing it against your own experience, asking how it applies to the challenge you faced yesterday or the decision you will make tomorrow. This transforms reading from an intake of information into a training of perception. You are not just learning what Marcus Aurelius thought. You are practicing how to think like him in the face of your own traffic jams and difficult conversations. The application is beautifully simple and requires no grand library. It is about consistency, not volume. You might commit to reading just one page from Meditations each morning with your coffee, or one letter from Seneca a week. The key is the second step, the moment of reflection. After you read, close the book. Take just 2 minutes to journal a single, practical takeaway. Do not summarize the passage. Ask yourself, what is one line that resonated? And more importantly, how can I live this today? Perhaps you read Marcus reminding himself that the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Your journal entry might be a single sentence: today, when I feel provoked, I will respond with calm action, not mirrored anger. That is the transition from philosophy on a page to philosophy in your pulse. This regular return to source material does something profound. It fights against the slow drift of forgetfulness. Our minds are porous, and the noisy world is constantly pouring in other values, other priorities. Without conscious reinforcement, even the strongest Stoic resolve can gradually dilute. 5 minutes with Epictetus is a recalibration. It is a quiet realignment with your chosen North Star, brushing away the dust of daily distraction. So here is your reflective prompt, a direct invitation to begin this sustaining conversation. For the next 7 days, commit to just 5 minutes each day. Read a short passage from a Stoic text, any one you choose. Then write down one sentence, just one, on how you will embody a piece of that wisdom before the sun sets. Notice what this tiny, consistent drip of ancient clarity does to the quality of your modern days. These habits are most powerful not in isolation, but as interwoven threads in your day. A list of 25 can feel overwhelming, as if you need to master everything at once to find any peace. That is the opposite of the Stoic approach. Think of these not as a rigid checklist, but as a flexible toolkit, a set of mental instruments you can reach for as the day demands. Their true strength emerges when they begin to support each other, creating a self-reinforcing system for calm. To make this practical, we can gently group them into a natural daily rhythm, a flow from morning preparation through midday navigation to evening reflection. This is not a prescription, but a demonstration of how the pieces can fit together into a coherent way of living. In the quiet of the morning, you lay the foundation. This is where you might engage the premeditation of challenges. Habit 1. Mentally rehearsing the day's potential friction points to drain them of surprise. You could couple this with a moment contemplating the ideal sage. Habit 15. Asking what your best self would look like today. Perhaps you practice a moment of voluntary discomfort. Habit 4. Like a brief cold splash of water to remind your senses they are under your command. This morning phase is about setting intention, not filling time with frantic activity. As the day unfolds and interactions begin, your toolkit shifts to navigation. Here, the dichotomy of control, habit 3, becomes your constant filter. When a stressor arises, you immediately sort it, asking what is mine to handle and what is not. Within that space, you apply cognitive distancing, habit 7, examining the initial impression before you assent to it. You might call upon the view from above, habit 5, to shrink a looming problem back to its true size, or practice a poverty of speech, habit 24, choosing listening over unnecessary debate. When you face an obstacle, you remember that it is the way, habit 23, and seek the virtue it invites you to practice. Throughout, you maintain the discipline of presence, habit 8, anchoring yourself in the current task, and you look for quiet opportunities for kindness, habit 22, as your natural social function. Then, as the day closes, you turn to integration and rest. The evening review, habit 2, is your cornerstone, a gentle audit of where your judgments served you and where they led you astray. This is the time to nourish your mind with wisdom. Habit 25, reading a few lines of Stoic text not as homework, but as a realignment with your chosen path. You would practice objective description. Habit 16, recounting the day's events in neutral language to separate the facts from your drama. And finally, you would cultivate gratitude. Habit 10, acknowledging 3 ordinary sufficiencies before sleep, building your sense of contentment on the solid ground of what you already have. This framework is simply a map. The territory is your own life. The overarching Stoic promise is not a life free from difficulty, but a self-directed life of tranquility and purpose, built from the inside out, one conscious choice at a time. The only way to begin is to start small, impossibly small. So here is your reflective prompt, a direct step from theory into your lived experience. Look back over these 25 habits. Which one single practice, if you focused on it deeply for just the next 7 days, would create the most noticeable ripple of calm in your daily life. Do not overthink it. Choose one. Commit to that one practice with gentle consistency. Watch how, by strengthening that single thread, the entire fabric of your day begins to feel just a little more sturdy, a little more yours. The journey toward an unshakable mind begins with a single, quiet choice. What we have explored is not a temporary fix, but a lifelong architecture for inner peace, built brick by brick through these 25 Stoic habits. Their true power lies not in dramatic transformation, but in the quiet accumulation of daily practice. Each time you pause before reacting, each moment you sort a worry through the lens of control, each instance you find sufficiency in what you already have, you are laying another stone in the foundation of your own mental fortress. This is the core message, that long-term calm and mental strength are not inherited traits or lucky accidents. They are crafts honed through the consistent, deliberate application of ancient wisdom to your modern moment. These habits are your tools for the most important project you will ever undertake, taking full ownership of your inner world. The Stoics promised a profound reward for this work, a peace that comes not from a silent world, but from a well-ordered mind. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire in constant turmoil, wrote of this inner sanctuary, that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. He knew that the quality of our life is determined by the quality of our attention and our judgments. Perhaps an even more direct call comes from Epictetus, who reminded us that happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle: some things are within our control and some things are not. This is the liberating truth at the heart of it all. The peace you seek is found in the diligent care of the things that are yours, your choices, your efforts, your character, while gracefully releasing your grip on all that is not. So where do you begin? Do not feel you must build the entire citadel in a day. Revisit this list not as a daunting mandate, but as a menu of possibilities. Let your intuition guide you to the one habit that whispers to your current challenge. Maybe it is the morning rehearsal for hardship, or the evening review of your judgments. Perhaps it is the simple practice of describing events objectively without the dramatic story. Choose one, just one, as your starting point. Commit to it for a week and observe the subtle shift it creates in your landscape. This is your journey of practice, and every step, no matter how small, is a step toward a stronger, calmer you. We would love to hear which of these 25 Stoic habits resonates most with you right now. Share your chosen starting point in the comments below. It is a powerful way to declare your intention and connect with others on a similar path. If you found this practical guide valuable, consider subscribing for more content that turns timeless wisdom into tools for everyday life. Thank you for your time and your attention. Go gently and build well.